Let's work on an intuitive watercolor painting and talk about the impact of a fried nervous system on your creative process. For this painting, I'm working on thick watercolor paper, and I'm starting by using watercolor pencils and bilateral drawing to loosen myself up. In this moment, my nervous system is fried. I have wanted nothing more than to just paint freely and have had no ability to do so because my nervous system has just been in a fight or flight response for weeks. So since my nervous system is fried, I'm going to start with a exercise like bilateral drawing because that allows me to kind of override the part that is telling me that I can't create because I don't have the capacity to create something I like right now. When you draw with two hands at the same time, it's very childlike and it's very amateur feeling. And so it's really hard to do anything that the perfectionist is going to be super proud of, no matter what you do with the bilateral drawing, unless that's like your specialty. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen that woman who can paint with her toes and her hands at the same time without even looking. It's really wild. But unless you're that person, usually using both of your hands makes it much more difficult to become really rigid in what you're doing. If my nervous system is fried, I don't have to also combat the perfectionist while trying to create. It allows the perfectionist to step aside a little bit and just observe the process of me letting go and drawing with two hands. So you may have noticed that I picked up these chunky crayons for this part of the process, and these are water-based crayons. They're like jelly crayons. There's some brands that are advertised for kids. This brand is more advertised for adults or for artists. They are kid-friendly, I'm pretty sure, but I love them because they invite in that inner child feeling of using those thick crayons that you would use in kindergarten or in preschool. And you can even hold the pencil like you would, or the crayon like you would when you were a kid, before you were told how to properly hold a crayon or a pencil. That can also really challenge the perfectionist part and invite in a looser process for your intuitive work. So if your nervous system is fried, if you've been super stressed out, if you've been depressed, if you have been in a fight or a flight mode situation, a fawn situation, the fawn situation or the fawn response of the nervous system is when we have to kind of pretend like we are okay in certain environments, or we have to mask up in certain environments, or blend into certain environments that actually really are jarring for us or really unfulfilling, or there's all sorts of words. But when you fawn, it's like you just go with the flow, even if the flow is potentially really hurting you. And that can be exhausting, and it can be a real energy drain, spirit drain, and creative drain. And so with the intuitive process, the goal is to override the nervous system in a way that says, no matter what happens, no matter what we do here in this painting session or in this art session, we are going to be okay with it because it's what our system needs in order to just tap into a present moment experience that is not overwhelming. And if your approach to intuitive painting, if you're trying to intuitive paint and you're noticing that you're getting extremely overwhelmed still, even with me talking through this with you, giving you the ideas of how to come to this process with an overridden or with a overrun nervous system, then that might mean you need additional support. You know, there's no shame in seeking therapy. There's no shame in seeking mentorship or something that can help regulate your nervous system. Somatic work, dance, all sorts of things out there that can help you to tap into that part of yourself. Some people meditate, some people do yoga, some people find those things to be just as overstimulating. So for you, if the intuitive painting process, no matter what you do, is triggering or is causing chaos or anxiety, then definitely look for additional support, because the idea here is that it really, I don't like to use the word should, but it really shouldn't make you feel worse to sit down and paint intuitively. And if it does, then there might be some additional barriers to work through before we sit down and do that. And there's no shame in that. And the more you beat yourself up about how hard it is for you to get here or how overwhelming it is when you do, the more that you're feeding that fight, flight, or fawn response. So I have been adding watercolor paint to the crayon lines, following the random patterns and line marks that were made during the bilateral drawing. So I'm essentially using the lines from the bilateral drawing to guide the intuitive process so that I'm not having to rely too much on my own intuition or my own imagination. When your nervous system is fried and you're super stressed or blocked or afraid or depressed, it's really hard to access your intuition, or it can be really hard to access your intuition. Or if you are accessing your intuition, it might be hard to just trust your intuition. And so you might be sitting here intuitively painting, but finding that the perfectionist is so present the entire time that it's not as enjoyable as you'd like it to be, because the whole time you're like, oh, you're intuitive painting? This is terrible. You're not even good at intuitive painting, or something along those lines. And so by allowing yourself to have guidelines with the bilateral drawing, it gives you a structure to work from. And so you can always blame the bilateral drawing lines, and rather than blaming your intuition, if that makes sense, it's something else to rely on. And that is perfectly okay. And we have to continue that mantra the entire time when you're intuitively painting, that it is okay if what we create is something we hate, or something that is considered ugly, or is not something that we can feel like we can show off, because the point of this is to get what is on the inside out. And I haven't seen a lot of pretty throw up in my life. Have you? Have you seen a lot of pretty vomit? And so if your intuition is throwing up onto the page and it's ugly, it just might mean it's necessary. And it might mean that you need a ritual around that. And every time you create something that you're having a lot of criticism around or judgment around, and then have a ritual where you burn it, or you rip it up, or you do something ceremoniously where you let it go, and you let go of the ideas or the expectations you had around that piece of it being something that you were going to feel proud of. Because what really is worth feeling proud of in the intuitive painting process is the fact that you're here in the first place, and the fact that you're even just putting pen to paper or ink to paper or whatever it is that you're doing. The fact that you're just here listening to me right now means that you're following your intuition in one way or another, because you're looking to be guided creatively. And if you're going to let me sit here and serenade you with my words around this, then that means you're one step closer to actually getting to the action of creating. So at this point in the painting process, I have started to create this greenery, and I knew going into this that I likely wanted something a bit floral, a bit spring-like. The days are getting longer here in New England, and I'm starting to think about my spring gardens. So I wanted something to feel soothing to the soul during these cold, blistery winter days and highly, highly stressful days, being a human in 2025 in the United States, and in the world in general, but specifically these last couple of weeks in the United States. So I started to get annoyed with the green because it was taking over, and I was getting lost in my brain, and not even in thought, it was just getting lost in flow, because this was the first time I had sat down in a while and let myself just paint. And so I just got lost and realized there was a lot more green on the page than I had wanted to, and forgot I wasn't painting with acrylic, so layering it was going to be a little more difficult. So I started to go in and follow the peach and pink lines to bring in more of a floral element. I focused a lot on holding my brush in loose ways and in ways that were not traditionally taught to me as a kid. I think a lot of time was spent on how I was supposed to hold my tools and how I was supposed to color inside the lines, and the parts of me that really wanted to break outside the box and do things differently was often scolded or told that that wasn't the way to do things, because my mom and my family was very strict around my education and me doing things the right way so that I could go be a doctor or go do something really heady for my career. A surgeon was the earliest goals for me was to be a brain surgeon. So I really have to challenge that part of me that wants to be rigid in how I hold things and do things, and how I want to do things the right way. Intuitive painting really challenges what's right and wrong and says whatever. And that could be really uncomfortable for a lot of people who thrive on structure. So if you thrive on structure, that's great. I'm not telling you that every painting has to be intuitive, but when you throw in this intuitive part, when you're noticing you can't access your traditional mediums because you're too overwhelmed or burnt out, excuse me, this is the perfect way to tap into something deeper and something more meaningful, even if the outcome isn't great. Now, if you notice yourself getting caught up in intrusive thoughts or rumination or future thinking or worrying thoughts, and you're noticing yourself just continuously getting distracted from the actual flow of intuitive painting because your nervous system is in cahoots, then something to do, something that you can try, is to use your senses to get present in this experience. So in traditional meditation, the idea is not to have no thoughts. Having no thoughts is pretty much impossible. The idea is more to not engage with the thoughts and just allow the thoughts to exist as passing images and messages, but to not fall into them, to not ask yourself any questions about them, to just let them exist. And if you notice yourself caught off in the thoughts and you do get dragged away by them, then you just bring yourself back. You bring yourself back to the present moment. You notice that you've gotten distracted. You might even say, thinking, and then bring yourself back. And that bringing back might involve something like, what am I smelling? What am I seeing? What am I feeling? What am I hearing? And you might say, I'm hearing my thoughts. So in this case, it might be, what am I seeing? I'm seeing the color white going over green, and I'm seeing green next to pink and pink next to peach. And I'm seeing a darker green and a lighter green. And you might say, what am I feeling? I'm feeling the touch of the paintbrush as it flows across the page. I'm feeling the water that is saturating the paper. I'm feeling the feeling of the cold end of the brush on my fingertips. I'm feeling how my body is connected to the chair that I'm sitting on. I'm feeling my clothing touching my skin. I'm feeling the temperature in the room, if it's warm, if it's hot, if it's cold. So using your senses and using what's happening right now in the moment to continuously bring you back. So if you're caught in thought, what are you smelling? If you're caught in thought, what are you feeling? If you're caught in thought, what are you seeing? And what are you seeing with painting is, I find for myself, the most powerful, because if I'm actually looking at what I'm doing and I'm saying, okay, in this moment, I am seeing a painting, I am seeing the brush moving, I am seeing myself working on an intuitive piece of art, it allows me to tap out of the thought process. Even if just for a second, even if I get caught right back up into those thoughts, I can bring myself back again. Painting. Thinking, painting. Thinking, painting. And you just kind of keep going. And at first it's dizzy making. At first it's crazy making, because you have to keep bringing yourself back. But intuitive painting is an excellent way to essentially mimic meditation. And if you get more and more comfortable with intuitive painting, you might find yourself getting more and more comfortable with meditation as well. At this point in the painting process, I am having deep regrets about the amount of green that I have on the piece. So my thought process kept getting caught up in, what is this? What does this look like? This doesn't look like anything. It doesn't look florally enough. The green's taking up too much space. And I was definitely finding myself trying to make sense of what I was seeing rather than allowing my intuition to just make what it was making without making sense of it. And that is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. I just wanted to be aware that it was happening so that when I came back and did this voiceover and talked about the process, I could acknowledge it and then essentially, hopefully, bring it to my next painting process and say, okay, last time you got really caught up in it not looking like X, Y, or Z. So let's see if this time we can try to really let go of what we want or think it should look like. Watercolor layering is not as easy as acrylic. You can't just cover up your mistakes, or it's harder to cover up your mistakes in the same way. And so letting the layers dry is a great reminder that when you let the layer dry, it will allow you to have more impact in how the part that you don't like gets covered up, because it's not just blending with the already wet paint. There are a lot more points of hesitation and longer points of hesitation than are shown in this video, but I did want to try to show some of my points of hesitation so you can see that it's not just all this quick and seamless process that social media shows you. I do try to be as real as I can in showing you exactly what's happening, but because of time limits and constraints on how far I can get these videos to go, depending on their length at this point, I did try to shorten the video. I think this entire painting session was more like an hour. Usually all of my painting sessions are at least an hour. And so if my videos are shorter than an hour, it's definitely not reflecting all the times that I get up, that I get distracted, that I do other things. And so social media is so deceiving. Even those of us here preaching intuitive process, preaching letting anything happen, letting anything, be the outcome, we are also here judging ourselves. And so just remember that. Every time you go to judge your process for being messy or chaotic, just remember that the chaos that we have going on behind the scenes is a lot different than maybe what we share. There was probably a 15 to 20 minute hesitation between me doing this here and finishing up the watercolor part. I could not let the green go, even though I did actually like the outcome for the most part. I just had to try to cover up the green. So I brought in the crayons and just let myself kind of fill in areas that I felt like were a bit too chunky with the green, and knew that this might possibly lead to me hating it even more. But it felt like exactly what I wanted to do in the moment, because my little inner child was like, meh, I don't like this. And I wanted to honor her and say, okay, let's see what we can do to try to make us like it. And if we can't make ourselves like it, then that is okay. The intuitive process is about allowing whatever comes to the table to come to the table without judgment. And if the judgment comes up, we don't judge ourselves for the judgment. We don't judge ourselves for judging the judgment, and so on and so on. This is a non-judgmental practice. This is a time for you to just exist creatively and create creatively. And if your resources are short in supply and you're afraid of making ugly art because you don't want to waste good materials, then just get a pen and a piece of paper and scribble and draw and make things that don't matter without having to have even any materials at all. A question you can ask yourself as we wrap up this intuitive painting and chat session is, how much are you getting in your own way? How much are you stopping yourself from painting when you really have actually no good reason to not? How much are you creating reasons in your mind why you can't just sit down and make time and make resources to do it? If it's a budget issue and a material issue, why is drawing on a piece of scrap paper not enough? Why is scribbling down on something random not enough? Why is painting on an old canvas not enough? Why is 5 minutes not enough time? Really, you can create if it is something you're truly passionate about and something you truly want to do. Get out of your own way. And if you're anxious or nervous or scared or depressed or tired, just do it anyways. You and your nervous system deserve it. Okay, I'm getting to the end of this painting, and overall, I wasn't horribly dissatisfied with the end result. I didn't love it, but I was happy with the process and how I showed up to it, and that was what mattered for this specific piece and this specific process. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. I am still very new to YouTube, still figuring out my flow here, what people like, what people don't like, but please be kind. I can't change my voice. I can't change certain elements of how I speak, but I can definitely switch up the content. I can definitely offer up more tutorial style if you'd like less mental health chat, but I am really looking to keep this channel more about process and internal experience and the creative psyche. I'm so grateful for this. I'm so grateful that there's so many of you already here. I'm really close to being monetized, so if you want to go back and watch some of my old videos, please do help me get there. Share, like, subscribe, and I hope that you find access to your intuitive process without judgment today, and if not today, then really, really soon. I'm so proud of you, and thanks again for being here.